Hello all and welcome to a glass interview with the UK glass explorer, Giannis, okay, I'm going to try this, Anastasiadis.
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
how well
great.
I did.
Yeah,
I'm going to be speaking with one of our first UK glass explorers in medicine and find out a little bit about why he decided to get into glass exploration, why he's becoming a glass explorer, what his area of expertise is, and we have a very exciting conversation that's going to happen today because he's asking to tap into viewers like you to get your ideas and your feedback so that he can create something that will be useful and exciting that is hopefully going to develop through a crowdsourcing technique that we're going to use today. So,
great.
hold on.
Thanks for the introduction.
Okay, so let's get started. Giannis, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What I'd like to know is, first of all, just who are you as a person? Because, you know, glass exploration really is dependent on the lifestyle and the personality of each glass explorer. So I'd like to give people an idea of who you are.
Great, thank you. So I'm a designer, I'm a product designer, and I have been working in the medical industry. I have specialized my studies in the medical industry. I have worked for big companies, and now I saw the possibility of putting augmented reality inside healthcare and using the glass uh, as a platform inside surgery or inside hospitals in general. And because now I'm really at the beginning phase of all this trip to put the glass in healthcare, I would like to know who might be interested in sharing some information of what has he done in the past and how we can probably collaborate in the future to to achieve great results with the glass. So yeah, I'm interested in many different areas. I would like to see glass as an assistance platform to help surgeons have access on other surgeons during surgery. I have talked with many universities, especially in the US, that are currently using glass, and I got inspiration from them, but I also want to see what other people, what are the developers, or what is out there, who is currently using glass, what are the problems they had to tackle, how did they tackle them, and so on.
So now, did you watch what was happening and developing in glass exploration in medicine before it came to the UK, or did you just first learn about glass when they opened it up to the UK?
Yeah, I just saw glass when I was here in the UK, and I'm really new on this field. It's only the last 2-3 months that I'm exploring this area. Before that, I was doing something completely different, and yeah, so I'm really new. I know about the development on the glass. I know how to develop it. I know how to be careful with the HIPAA compliance and everything. But I'm really new, as I said, on this field.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you are not inexperienced in startup companies, right? You have a previous startup company?
Yes, I started a company together with an electrical engineer and two doctors, two surgeons. And this happened almost a year ago. And now I don't spend my full time on this project because we kind of lack few resources and we are waiting for that. But it's an exciting product. It's about the motion tracking and how to help the rehabilitation process, how to help the physiotherapists have access on patients after joint surgery. And the main problems we want to tackle is about the compliance during rehabilitation, and we also want to put some really innovative wearable sensors inside the products that the patients already use in order to remotely monitor how the process of rehabilitation happens.
Now
And
this is your first startup
yes,
we're talking
exactly.
about.
And now it's been 3 months that I am working on another startup, and we don't want to make. Fortunately, I cannot say the name because It's totally different from the glass, and we are trying to explore the glass possibilities and probably put the glass inside this startup. And before that, I was in the Netherlands studying medical design, and yeah, and I work for a big company, a big medical device company for Biomed. It's also the headquarters are in the US, but there are many departments around the world. And I work for them, and I specialized in orthopedic surgery while working for Biomed.
Well, I have a question from a viewer that I'd like you to address. Dorian would like to ask, does a HIPAA-type set of regulations exist there in the UK?
There are different type of regulations in the UK. I would say that it's more strict to put glass in the UK, and it's kind of easier in the US because the market already is familiar with the glass. So that's why we are also trying to address our products in the US and not in the UK. But yeah, at the same time, this week we talked with NHS about the implementation of augmented reality in NHS hospitals. NHS is the government, the healthcare government in the UK. Mm-hmm. And they told us that they want to do it. And they kind of feel sorry that we have to address our products in the US and not in the UK yet. But there are many, many regulations. First of all, you have to be CE approved of whatever you do. At the same time, it has to be a medical device. And so, yeah, it's different regulations, and I would say that are more strict in Europe.
Okay. Well, let's get down to, let's talk about your glass exploration so far before we get into some possible areas where you might want to develop. You've had glass for how long?
Yeah, it's 3 months.
3 months. And in those 3 months, what would you say are the highlights of your glass experience? What things do you like about glass that you think are different than other products?
Well, I really like the fact that you can bring someone else's expertise in front of you while you are either learning or having a difficulty during a certain procedure. So I imagine glass during surgery, and when a trainee surgeon doesn't know what the next step is, or he is not sure about an error that has happened, how to tackle that error, I see a huge possibility on putting another expert inside. There is a company, Wearable Intelligence, that they do this successfully. But I really like this. I really like this because I have seen operating rooms. I have seen how the surgeons collaborate, and there are many moments that they need another person, either a consultant surgeon or a more expert from them, to come inside the operating room and assist them to go on with the process. So I see a huge possibility of putting an expert inside with the glass or with another augmented reality application and assist remotely. And especially in trauma surgery, I see this possibility. There are many hospitals that they don't have access to trauma care. So there are many cases that you can bring the trauma experts inside surgery, and assist the surgeons who probably don't have this expertise.
Mm-hmm. Just to share with you, recently I was in India and I brought glass with me on a medical mission trip, and it wasn't a part of the plan, but I thought it would be fun to expose some of the doctors to glass just as possibilities of what might be in the future. And one of the doctors, Dr. Rita, brought it into the surgery room. Well, they were actually doing a I forgot what they were doing, an angiogram or something. I forget what they were doing, but she put it on, and her comment was she forgot she was wearing it. It was that easy to wear that she was able to record everything she was doing, and she said, "Can I call somebody?" And I said, "Well, you know, we have privacy issues we have to build into it, but once it's built into it, yes, you can have conversations and they can see what you see." And she was very excited about that being something that could happen, that she could tap into a more senior surgeon when she's doing something.
Of course, of course. The emerging markets, I think it's a huge potential for the glass to bring the experts in areas that they probably don't have the expertise to perform something. It's like I heard from UCSF University that they are trying to develop a system to help emerging markets with anesthesiologists, for instance. They don't have many anesthesiologists in the emerging markets, and they want to bring the expertise of an expert anesthesiologist to these emerging areas, so that a young anesthesiologist can have all the access on the information he might need during the surgery from someone who is expert in the other side of the world. So I see huge potential on this.
Yeah. Well, to give you an idea of where glass exploration has gone, the evolution of glass exploration from the U.S., I know when a lot of us first got glass, there was a lot of talk about the power of using glass in medical education because it was one of the easiest things to implement from a privacy perspective. And then it evolved into, isn't this cool in the ER? Isn't this cool in surgery because we could use it for telemedicine and we could have consults, virtual consults, and that was really exciting. And we thought we were, really onto something great, and then more people came in and more people had new ideas, and it really evolved more into those processes where bringing information into context of whatever you're doing, taking electronic medical records and presenting select pieces of those records that apply to what a person is doing at a given time, and the ability to know where that person is,
yeah,
to know the position of their body, to very accurately guess what they're doing, a surgeon bending over versus standing up. Those kind of things have really begun to evolve glass application development. And so that's where we are today, is talking about where do we go from here? What are some new ideas that maybe you haven't seen take place, that you are wanting to explore? Any ideas possible, is that right?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, and I'm really curious to learn what other companies see, or what other individuals see about the glass in healthcare or in other high-risk environments, to get inspiration from, for instance, in military or aviation. Is anyone out there who is trying to put the glass in aviation? Because there are many things in common with aviation and healthcare. I mean, the checklist in the past that we kind of moved the checklist from aviation inside healthcare with great results. So I really want to see what other people think and see for the glass.
Well, I just invited two of the viewers that are posting some comments, because rather than trying to read the Q&A comments and all of the things taking place, I think it would be fun to bring them in. So I have invited Aaron Jansen in, and I have invited Dorian Sanchez in, and I see that Aaron is already joining us, so that's great. And maybe Dorian will check her notifications or his notifications if watching through the here we go, and they both have joined. So I'd like to open up the floor for all kinds of discussion here, because I think that we can have a better discussion if we can have people asking questions live. So Aaron, I don't see his camera yet. Oh, I don't see either of their cameras. It might take a moment for them to load in. So we'll give them just a minute to get completely into the Hangout. Sometimes it takes a little while to get in here. There we go with Dorian. So I'm going to start with Dorian and introduce Dorian. Hi there.
Hi, how's it going?
Great. Dorian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as far as your background in medicine or in whatever area of expertise you specialize in?
Yes, I've actually worked in
So that's
healthcare,
great. And maybe Dorian will check her notifications. His notifications.
5+ years.
Walking through the...
Sounds like someone has...
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who... Here we go. I got him muted.
Okay, great. So I've been in healthcare IT for 5+ years. I've dealt with the implementation of EMRs, implementing solutions into hospital setting, and also as a glass explorer, I'm actually in the process of developing EMR integration with glass with existing EMRs.
Wonderful. Okay. Sorry, I think I had it on Aaron the whole time, so people are going to see him looking very puzzled. Aaron is probably listening through the actual playback, which is why I've muted you, Aaron. So if you're playing the video behind the scenes, please stop playing that. He's got an okay. Now you can unmute yourself and invite yourself in, Aaron. Can you go ahead and unmute yourself and talk to us now? See, I muted him one too many times, and now he's not sure how to unmute himself, I think. So there. Nope. He's got to figure out how to unmute himself. So we'll let him spend a little time. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. I'm going to go back to Giannis. And Giannis, can you give us an idea of kind of some of the things you've been playing with, or do you want to share any of that?
Of course I can share. I have looked into the EMR, but not with focus on putting the glass in EMR. I just wanted to see how complicated this area is, and I found out that in the US it's it's complicated. It's complicated. It's documents and patient information that goes from one place to the other, and all this has to be encrypted, and all this shouldn't leave hospital's firewall. So yeah, I want to see how, for instance, Aaron. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, but you're getting a lot of feedback.
Okay, hold on just a second.
I'm going to mute him until he figures it out. I'm sorry, Giannis.
No problem, no problem. So yeah, a question I have for Aaron, that he said that he works in the EMR implementation.
No, I actually.
All right, I have to hold on. Aaron, I'm going to have you find a different way to do your sound, because as soon as you turn your sound on, we get this horrible sweeper sound that we're not able to hear anything else. So is there something you can do to fix your sound?
Is that better?
Yeah, it is better.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so my name's Aaron Jansen. I'm actually I actually consult with a company called Context Aware Computing. They have a product called Context Surgery that actually allows you to take that information. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, take telemetry information coming from medical devices and provide it to surgeons in the operating room themselves. One of the main challenges that we have here in this kind of an integration is integrating with the larger EMR systems, and the way that actually happens is through an open API that's published on the web, and you can basically build to that API to pull the information back into the systems. There are HIPAA-related issues with that, and obviously the way that we've basically been able to address it and start to move into a prototype and development experimental phase is to actually have patients sign a medical and legal release form that allows us to use their technology and allows them to basically, kind of like a sign-off if you're going to be on TV or something like that, to allow, to allow the surgeon and to allow the other medical organizations to work with that data. And initially we thought that there was going to be a lot of resistance from patients in the legal community and what have you. But as it turns out, if a patient sees you with it on before they've given you the okay, that's an issue, right? But if you say to the patient, we're doing an experiment right now, we're working on...
I think he just froze. Yep, I think he just froze. We're doing an experiment and then it froze. So that's just a teaser there. Yeah, we're talking about the patient permission. That is one of the first issues that all Glass Explorers have to address, is because Glass has the ability to record and gather information. And because there is how would I say this? There is a lack of understanding of Glass. So in order to address that, we have to really go through the proper process of getting patient consent before anything can be used with Glass. Some of it because of HIPAA and some of it because of the perception of Glass. So hopefully Aaron will come back in and we'll be able to pick up where we left off there. So both of you, it sounds like, are in... There he is. There he is.
I'm back. Actually, it turns out we had some updates that I hadn't said okay to restart. So anyway, another machine. How you guys doing? Sorry about that. So yeah, so let me let you in on some things. So my background, well, about 20 years ago, I got into emergency medical services, and 25 years ago, after working in South Central Los Angeles, I was working in Oakland. We're having the 25th anniversary of the earthquake that happened there, and I was working that day and had a chance to go down and did a lot of triage work and what have you. So that's my background, and context to where computing has brought me in to kind of manage their first responder program. So we're looking at taking this technology and moving out into the field. The core of the technology, as I said, I don't know how much you heard there, but is to feed vital sign telemetry straight in to the surgeons. Also looking at checklists, right? One of the things that makes flying so safe is the ability to be able to use checklists to make sure that you put the landing gear down and make sure that you have all of those things in order. And so to have those checklists available, and then also timeouts are really important, because you only have a certain window for surgery, and if patients are under anesthesia for too long, it can really cause some serious problems. So you have a certain window that you can do things in, and these timeouts help remind surgeons that they're within a certain time range, and it kind of keeps them on track. So they're able to glance up to see the telemetry of their patient, glance up and see the checklist of the things that they have to do. Now that's kind of a manual process right now, but as we start to prototype those technologies and then look at, we're in the process right now of doing beta testing. As a matter of fact, I think it's at Queen's Hospital as well in the UK. We have projects going in the UK, in Japan, I believe, as well as Dubai. So we're trying to go all over the world, look at the individual medical device requirements in the EU and in other areas. And so we're in the process right now of having all of our devices certified as FDA devices, so they could be brought directly into surgery without having a lot of problems. The trouble is, if you try to bring in, as you know, you try to bring a device into surgery, the first thing the administrators are going to say is this device medically cleared, right? And so that's the process that we're involved in. It's going to take a little longer to develop that device certification, but at the same time, we also want to work with teaching hospitals, emergency medical services academies, training environments, those sorts of things. One of the largest hospitals here in California has a simulator environment. So this basically is a simulated OR, it's a simulated ER, it's a simulated ambulance, right? It's all real stuff, but it's in environments where they can do things like they can control the temperature. They can bring in more moisture, right? They have a controlled environment. They can introduce sound. They can do a lot of different things to see how people and procedures and technology actually works in those kind of hostile environments. The reality is that if you take that stuff out into the field where I'm an expert, it's a totally different story. And glass is a great technology, but it's very fragile, right? So we have some different issues that we have to face when we go out into the field of chemicals and moisture and hot environments, those sorts of things. So we're trying to run those two tracks in parallel. The surgery track will get there first, and then our track will eventually meet up. But we want to be able to go out, take vital signs from the patients, and have those vital signs follow the patients all the way along into the OR, right? So we would be able to have a vital sign set that was initially done by the first responders, per se, and then a more complicated vital sign set as advanced life support arrives, as we put them on the helicopter, maybe as we fly a trauma surgeon like Paul Zotek in or somebody like that. Once those surgeons arrive, they have the ability to actually stream the video, or the paramedic supervisors, those sorts of things. So that's ultimately what we're looking at, is the ability to bring that data together visually, if it works, if you got the bandwidth, and then maybe in other situations where you can take a picture of the patient, or perhaps look at more details of the patient, have that information filled in. So basically, you'd be at low bandwidth, and as you got closer and closer and closer to the trauma center, there'd be more data. Ultimately,
Aaron,
yeah.
I want to ask you a question then.
Sure.
You've talked a lot about what you're involved in with developing, but you can't do everything. So I'm going to ask you an interesting question.
Sure.
If you could order up, like a menu item, an application, a glass app that would complement what you're doing,
mm-hmm.
but that you don't have time or maybe resources or know how to do, what would that app look like?
So there's any number of different applications. There's so many different things, because basically what it's talking about is everything we do in medicine being able to improve it, right? There's obviously some social limitations out there, but when you say if there's something that I would like to do, what I don't quite understand where you're coming from as far as
the purpose of this discussion is to crowdsource ideas of things that have not yet been developed that Giannis might be able to consider and see if it's something that he and his mystery company that shall be unknown until the future can work on. So what we're trying to narrow down is not what's already out there, but what isn't already out there but is needed.
So yeah, and the question is what area are you talking about? I mean, there's anything from, you know, augmented reality capabilities, right? The ability to do things like, you know, work in social environments for, you know, how do I put it? Glass is a great technology, and it can show us a wide variety of things that need to be improved and changed. So if we can integrate the social aspect to glass, there are some real challenges there right now. But I've heard of you know, a variety of different systems that let you geolocate, right? That allow you to glass has some native geolocation features built in. So the ability, for instance, for me to you know, to group with a group of people that were interested in gardening, right? And my ability to be able to see where all of those locations are, or my ability to be able to integrate with a series of people that have similar interests. Google already has some of those capabilities out there, but I really think that's an area that can be expanded on. Did that answer your question, Kathy?
Sure. Dorian, do you have any comments?
Yeah, there's a lot of I guess technologies that can be integrated with glass. I think hospitals already, especially the facility that I work with, we have like patient tracking systems. We have a lot of fragmented systems, so a lot of different data points. But as we know in the medical field, we're all about, you know, timing, getting stuff done quickly, recording that data, and being able to use it. So where glass can come in is bringing a lot of those data points into one apparatus to one person at a time, and be able to communicate that back to the collective.
Giannis?
Yeah, yeah, that was a good point from Dorian. This is what I have found as well, that there is a huge amount of information, and the glass can be a good platform to bring this information in reality and give this info to the doctors or everyone that is interested in. But I have another question, that how long is does it take to get the FDA approval and all the regulations? I mean, from the moment that you have an MVP or an MVP tested and the doctors want that MVP, how long does it take to go through all the regulations and all the paperwork and bring this idea to life?
It can take years, and that's the experience that we're depends on the kind of device. First of all, you need to have a device for them to test, right? If you have a device, it's a different story, just testing hardware, right? It's a question of testing the software integration. If you're talking about testing between medical devices, each medical device, like Siemens, has its own you know, protocols, the own way that they're doing things. Other device manufacturers have their own protocols. So it's the issue, I would say, of being able to integrate with those individual devices. If you want to talk to blood pressure cuffs, or if you want to talk to, you know, SaO2 monitors, things along that line, pulling that information in becomes a challenge if you're trying to go between multiple devices. If you have one kind of device that you're looking at, you can write the code to that particular API, or write the code back to the EMR system as well. But the challenge is then, once you build that, is to take that through the FDA process. And a lot of the medical device process that you're talking about just has to do with things like electromagnetic you know, radiation produced by the device. Does it actually interfere with other devices? Does it interfere with wireless? Things along that line. And if you look at the back, if you have a newer version of glass and you turn it over, it actually has the EU certification to allow those devices to come into the EU. So basic device safety has already been done. Mm-hmm. When you start looking at, it really is an expensive, long process to go through that. The trouble is that if you develop a product and then you want to come up and say, yeah, we just put this app together, you usually get resistance from administration, right, at that level to say, we're not going to bring this application. Let's say this. Let's say you're using it in surgery, and the surgeon was too distracted and made a mistake, right?
Because of the glass. Yeah.
Right, and that's the medical liability issues that they're looking at an administrative level, and those are the people that have to give you the authorization to use the device in the hospital. So it's really important to build to their requirements. Also, it's critical to understand that glass is not the same kind of technology as a cell phone, or it's a glance technology, right? So it's really designed just to move your eyes and see a little bit of information, then it goes away, right? The trouble is that if you actually continuously use it, it starts to get hot, right? And the resource is very powerful, but it's not, it's not perfect. Everybody thinks that they have, a video camera on their head that's going to run for hours and it's going to get great video. The reality is that that's actually just not true. So we have to use it sparingly. And also we have to use it so, if I pick up a cell phone and I did the same thing that's on my cell phone in glass, it's going to be in front of my eye all the time, right? So it has to be built in an entirely different way. And that's really some of the challenges, because Android is where it's built, but glass is the service on top of it. And people think, oh, I'll just take my Android app and just turn it into something in glass, and it really doesn't work that way. So you have to have a different design team around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different UX, in other words, user experience. You really have to keep in mind what wearables in general were designed for. It was designed for spurts of information at a certain time when you need it, when you want it. So, like in a hospital setting or in a medical setting, it applies the same way. When you're designing an application for it, you want to keep in mind that doctors and nurses and everyone else, they're going to be doing different things, and what they're going to want from glass at a certain situation is could be different from another situation.
Yeah. When I was talking with some hospital administrators and asking them, what are the areas where you'd like to see tools to improve on a topic, one of the areas that we honed in on was, and I've said this before in other Hangouts, is noise reduction. When you're in a critical care unit, when a patient is in a critical care unit, they're connected to a lot of equipment, and each one of those pieces of equipment has bells and whistles and alarms that go off when the
Feed that goes paying, exactly.
Yeah, and I experienced this several years ago when my sister was in the ICU, that there was always something going off, and it was frustrating from a patient standpoint, because every time it went off, I was worried, and somebody would come in when they felt like it, push a button and walk away like it wasn't even important. And sometimes they say, oh, that isn't one you have to worry about, and they'd walk away. And what I discovered when I had conversations with administrators was that people who work in the hospital in that setting become numb to those noises, because so many times it doesn't mean anything.
Just like a crying baby, right? Exactly.
Right. And so being able to take glass and push those alarms in different forms directly to the people who are supposed to be notified by those alarms, and giving a different level of alarm. And glass can even vibrate on your head. So that can be the most severe, hey, pay attention. But to be able to push those notifications silently in the hospital but loudly to that specific person would not only minimize the number of notifications and bells and whistles that people have to shut out so that they become numb to the noise, but it would directly alert the people who need to respond sooner. I think that is one area that we haven't yet tapped into that would make for a better patient experience, better patient satisfaction scores, and better outcomes from people who are supposed to be responding sooner.
Yeah, I think Code Blue crash teams, for instance, that would be a good way to page people, that sort of stuff. You can also give vital sign telemetry of exactly what's going on. As Kathy mentioned, it's a very noisy environment, and as you said, once a machine goes off, everybody's worried that it's going to be the end of the world, and some nurse just comes in and, as you said, says, oh, well, that's just one of 17 buttons I've pressed. So the ability to be able to integrate with those medical devices to reduce the noise, right? We all, if we're sick, we don't want to hear a bunch of noise, and that's exactly what happens when you go into a hospital. You can't really sleep. I totally agree with that. Also, you have to remember that in these extremely noisy situations, one of the things that we see with glass is that people talk to glass, But if you're in a very noisy situation, like a resuscitation room, right, you can't be talking to glass if you have 17 other people talking to you at the same time. Or if I'm on a really bad car crash and I'm using a Hearst tool and doing extrication, there's no way that I'm going to be able to talk to glass. So it's important to remember that you have to probably have a couple of different interface modes, right? You have to have an interface mode where you can talk back and forth to it, and then you probably have to have another mode where it's perhaps controlled from somewhere else that you can be working with other people, you know, if you're on a cell phone or something like that, or directing traffic, because it's really important to remember you can be a victim of information overload just as you can be a victim of sound overload.
Good point.
Yeah, and glass has a nice feature to it is back here. You can hear it does tones very well. Like I've used the haptic feedback to talk on the phone and whatnot, and in a noisy, you know, bar or anything like that, you can't really use it. But in a very quiet room, you can hear the voice and everything like that. But even in a noisy environment, if you're getting a phone call, you can actually hear it very, very well. So like certain tones.
Yeah.
Is it something like a buzzer or a speaker? Is it something like a...
What it is it translates sound into vibrations. That particular piece is right at the audible bone behind your ear.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, people who are somewhat deaf or have a hearing impairment, they can actually use glass and be able to hear voices and things like that, or sounds.
Yeah, right at the end is a bone-conducting microphone that rests on the back of your skull, and basically it just vibrates. They use the same thing with SWAT teams. They'll put a microphone right on your cheek, and basically you can feel the vibrations coming through. It's sometimes not clear, and obviously in noisy environments it's not going to work very well, but it sure can ring your it can ring your bell when it rings, and it can alert you to a variety of different things. So it's usable to a certain extent, but it's mostly usable for, you know, major alerts.
So since we're talking about features of glass, I do want to make a point here. Dorian, you're wearing, people who are not familiar with glass are probably wondering what's coming off your head. So I want to address the fact that
Your landline.
one of the weaknesses of glass is the battery life. And I'm assuming, Dorian, that is a power extension probably going down to a power source. Am I right?
Yeah, it's currently connected to my laptop at the moment, so I can get some juice. It was completely drained this morning as I used it yesterday. So that is a feature that does create issues, is especially if you're going to have it in the medical field. The battery, depending on what you're using it for, video, GPS, certain features of glass, certain software features will drain the glass really, really quickly. So it can go from anywhere from lasting a whole entire day to lasting just a couple hours.
Yes, and we did have a discussion in the early days of the very first medical glass explorers that one of the early solutions was to plug in the power source like Dorian has to run it through, believe it or not, what do they call it, a baby pin? What do they call those?
Bobby pin?
A safety pin, because it has an open loop area that will keep the strap away from falling into any space you don't want it to fall into, and then running it into a battery pack like a Mophie battery source.
We usually have two of those, right? Everybody carries at least two battery packs, right? One to charge, and then the other one that's actually being used. So that's a good way. And you'll see, like, you know, if we have conventions and everything, you know, people are always, just like in the airports, always looking to plug in. But the nice thing is you can loan somebody, you know, your battery while theirs charges up a little bit. So always get two.
I only have one, but I have a really good one.
There you go. Well, or one that lasts a long time.
Well, there's one battery pack that you can plug in multiple devices. You can have your iPad charging, you can have your iPhone charging, you can have glass charging, you can charge 3 or 4 devices.
We're actually also looking out in the field at potentially integrating it with a fire helmet, right, with solar chargers on it. So, for instance, obviously it'll only work during the day, but for extended rescues and structural collapses and things along that line, it's a good way to be able to augment that battery. And as you said, the real challenge is what you're using it for. If you start doing video and you start taking multiple-minute videos, you'll wipe your battery out pretty quick.
Yep.
So it's the recording of the video, and also the playback of the video that takes.
Well, it's also things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all the other services, geolocation,
GPS.
right? GPS, all of those things you can turn off selectively, right? So the Bluetooth thing is important if you happen to be out and about and you need to connect to your cell phone, right? Wi-Fi is obviously important if you want to share your photos or backup or whatever. But you can turn those off selectively depending on the situation that you're in to try to conserve battery.
Great. And have you probably heard anyone who, or yourself, that you can turn on or turn off the Wi-Fi when you actually need it? So, for instance, if you are in a hospital and you talk with many patients and you want to store all this information on the glass, but you don't want to send this information to your servers and you want to send them once per day, for instance. So, in the end of the day, you decide that you want to send all the information.
A synchronization mode. That's
Yeah.
I have experience with that myself with the EMR integration because you have onboard memory on the glass. You can have when you're developing your app, you can have everything be stored and then have a synchronization process on command or when you select it
Or
at the end of the
time,
day.
Cron job at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can actually have the Wi-Fi turned off throughout the whole day, and then to save battery, and then in the end of the day you just turn it on to sync all your information.
Depends on the situation. I mean, again, if you're in a situation where you're in the ER, or you're going from patient to patient, it's gonna need Wi-Fi and data. I mean, you can probably turn it off in between patient visits. Or something like that. There are certain situations where you can, and that's the challenge.
Yeah. Is that more of a limitation of the storage capacity?
It's not really a limitation of the storage capacity, whereas you're trying to gain access to certain data points. I mean, you can't store all the data on the glass, especially when you need to get access to a new patient you haven't seen all day.
Yeah, it's only 16 gigs of space on there. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but in reality, once you start, so the question is how connected to the mothership do you really need to be, to the central data repository, right? The EMR records are becoming more and more critical in a clinical environment. If you happen to be, let's say, out, I'm from New Mexico, so if you happen to be out in one of the reservations, for instance, with no Wi-Fi access, but you were seeing patients, right, that might be an applicable use for it, and then once you went back, you were able to upload. But if you're in a clinical situation, you continuously are being updated. If that patient is really a sick patient, they've been seen multiple times, that maybe medical records are coming in, lab records are coming in, a lot of different stuff, maybe you have a CT scan that's been evaluated. I want to be able to see that information, right away and be able to have continuously add to it. So that's a very high data intensive environment in the hospital. Always needing to be on, in my opinion.
Yep.
And is it true that the hospital administration is actually afraid of this glass synchronization, that they actually say it's okay to capture any data you want inside the hospital, but what we are afraid of is when you take the glass outside the hospital and you go probably at your home and the glass starts synchronizing, then we
exactly
Excellent question.
We're afraid of any leaking point or...
Right.
So there's a couple of school of thoughts on this type of subject. Some facilities have gone to the length of actually completely changing out the Glass OS so that information cannot leave the facility. There's also encryption methods, and so basically you're accessing the information, and let's just say that it leaves the IP location of that hospital. Then suddenly you don't have access to that information anymore. It's not on the glass.
In addition, that information can be could be vetted. Just like you said, once you go out of a certain Wi-Fi range, there are ways to actually code to the kernel level and basically take over glass. The challenge is that if every different hospital does it, there isn't a unified standard across the board. PCI, which is another compliance standard that we use, is similar to HIPAA, and PCI is actually even stronger encryption. So a lot of the stuff that's going on in the industry is somewhat applicable. The real challenge is, as Kathy mentions, is what about accidental synchronization, right? You know, if you accidentally take a picture of a patient, or it ends up on your on your machine, something like that, that's a serious legal violation nowadays, right? And so the challenge with administrators is they say it's easier to ban things right now than necessarily try to fight that big battle. So that's the process that we're going in right now, is acceptance of glass, understanding the HIPAA structures, and then trying to really figure it out. Because at the end of the day, if you have to go through a process to say, yes, upload this file, then that puts the onus back on the physician for what's appropriate. Also, it's important to remember that certain physicians don't just stay at the same hospital. Right? You have attending physicians at a certain hospital, but also you have floating physicians that might have 5 or 6 different hospitals that they go to. How do you make sure that the patients that are in one hospital, that information doesn't transfer over to the other hospitals, etc.? So if I'm a physician, they're all my patients, but I might be under different regulations for each hospital, so it can get complicated.
Yeah, a quick way I see that how you can actually solve that problem is actually rip off all the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, and then just say I'm gonna synchronize any data with a cable or with a traditional method, just to be sure that nothing goes outside the hospital's servers.
Yeah, the trouble is that the speed of serial connection, right, is not as fast, and so it's really focused on trying to bring that that high bandwidth to the Wi-Fi side of things. But yeah, high Wi-Fi, low battery, so it's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah.
But that definitely is a challenge, and it does create a situation where these apps are taking longer to come out with. Like, I'm currently going through that challenge right now with my app, my EMR integration. So I'm actually coming up with a very lengthy, complicated encryption algorithm that's pretty intuitive, actually.
Everybody silently says, wow.
It's a lot of work.
So there's a lot of standards out there, AES 256, there are a lot of standard encryption standards that are already available, right? And if you apply to those encryption, the trouble is that encrypting things takes more time. It also takes more horsepower, right? It can cause glass to really have to struggle. And that's my background is in network security. So we deal with this all the time. Trying to encrypt traffic and then send it at high speeds can be really, really processor intensive and challenging. So those are the limitations, right? Glass is great technology. It's very small, very wearable, very unique, but it's not a computer on your head. It is to a certain extent, but it's not a desktop, right? It doesn't have all the capabilities and performance. So you really got to just kind of use it, sparingly.
You really need the assistance of an appliance, an additional appliance, to really get certain solutions.
Also, it's important to understand, in those environments, right? We really see probably to have an appliance actually at the the hospital, right? And what that allows you to do is that allows you to remove some of the problems of buffering. So if you have 2 people that are trying to talk to each other using glass, and there's some data problem between the 2, you'll have some buffering issues, right? Some slowdown, some packet loss, those sorts of things. If you're just going between individuals, if you actually talk to a centralized server, that server can cache data and can smooth things out, and it also can do encryption as well. And that's taking the processing off of your, this is really an end I/O device, right? Input and output. It's not really designed to be the processing device. It's designed just to see the final result.
And that'll also assist you in the issue of taking the data outside of that particular hospital,
right?
Between hospitals, if you think about it.
Exactly right.
That's a lot. Giannis is quiet all of a sudden.
yeah, I'm just trying to process all this information.
Yeah, we're giving him a lot of information here.
But it's great input.
So I actually used to live in London as well, and so I'm familiar with the NHS. And I'm familiar with some of the differences in the structures, right? I mean, it's a unified, universal system across all of the UK. it's harder to break into, but once you have established those standards, it's pretty ubiquitous across all of the hospitals, right? So what I would suggest is looking at because we have an entirely different system here where it's every single hospital does kind of a different thing. They all have to apply to a uniform standard, which is HIPAA, but in the NHS, if you can do something like get the buy-in and then do some practices or some prototypes at other hospitals, teaching hospitals obviously would be the way to go, and then start developing that. It's going to be challenging because you have to deal with cultural issues, you have to deal with administration, you have to deal with technology, right? You have to deal with EMR systems, you have to deal with hardware. All of those different things can kind of come and bite you. So it's important to find good references, you're connected to this community, and we can help you out finding the experts that can help you in each one of those areas.
Oh, great, thank you. And you mentioned before that you are actually working with hospitals in the UK. So you have tested the glass here, or is it a different product?
We're working in that process right now. I'm actually not responsible for that, but I can put you in touch with the right people. So what we're doing is we're going through demonstration phases to kind of show it to surgeons, to show it to clinicians, to show it to administrators, to get their interest started, right? Because if a doctor comes in and says, wow, check out this new thing that I've found, sometimes it's not the same process, right? We want to get that process started, but we want to bring in everybody at all of the different levels at the same time. And so what we've done is we've done demonstrations as I said, at conferences and a wide variety of areas, and we have beta tests now in 4 locations, and I believe we did.
Yeah, so the market is actually starting to be prepared of the glass integration.
Yeah, it's actually, and the challenge and the great thing about that, and you really have to have the buy-in actually from the folks that are got the masks on, as we say, right? You gotta really get the buy-in from those people that they understand that glass is some people think it's a real panacea that's going to do a lot of things for you. It has a lot of potential, but you've got to have those people involved in the developmental phase, right? We see a lot of times that developers will develop interesting software out there, but they haven't really incorporated the people that are actually going to end up using it. So I would say that the first thing you should do is you should find a group of people that have similar interests, and obviously this is the way to do it. Find a group of people that have similar interests, and then make sure that all of those people are kind of moving in the right direction. And you can really make some interesting interesting progress, but there's a lot of pitfalls out there, right? For instance, there's glass CPR technology, right? That interfaces with the Mayo, right? And that's great stuff as long as the patient isn't moving. Once you put a patient in an ambulance, it overloads the accelerometers, right? And so if you're trying to do CPR and you're bouncing around, glass can't do that same interpretation. So that's really what's important to have those people involved initially, so you don't end up spending a lot of development cycles on something that ends up being not going to fly.
Yeah, I was thinking about the integration of Mayo with the glass inside surgery, but I think that the surgeons have a certain way of using their hands while they are doing the surgery, and if we say that you also have to do this in order to interact with the glass, I think that we are adding some features on some axioms that they probably are not familiar with, or they don't want to get into that. But the Mayo is a great platform. It's but I don't really.
Actually, that's already being done. PEDCAS has integrated Mayo, and what's the other one? There are 2 of them that are motion sensors, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but they've done that where they use it to use non-touch to move through displays. So if surgeons need to go back to a screen for reference, they can navigate that screen without having to scrub out and having to touch anything. They do it purely through the air, and they go through some process where they stand up and identify that that's them, and then they put their hand on, and then they can scroll through.
Yeah, I was actually talking about the Mayo blood pressure cuff that's actually on the wrist itself, and so as you're doing CPR, right, there's actually an integration between glass. You put glass on, you put the blood pressure cuff on the patient, and as you compress the patient's chest, you can actually see the amount of perfusion that's happening there to make sure that you're doing it. Oh, the app is called Glass CPR. It's available now. You can download it, you can sideload it, you can check it out. But that's a kind of an application, and it was very innovative, right? But that's the kind of an application that, they did some testing on it, and they said this is a great idea, but unfortunately there are limitations in some of the hardware technologies out there, and it's it works great, as I said, as long as the patient is flat. But then the integration, and that's where you have to test it, right? You have to test it in simulation, so you don't spend a lot of extra development time, having to go back and recreate the wheel, from the beginning. So we can help you out in all that and kind of let you know where the pitfalls are.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a very good, strong community of healthcare glass explorers. You're aware of the community that we have on Google+.
Yes.
And people have really come together to help each other develop some of the things that are out there today. So, and I know that you know some of those early glass explorers because you've mentioned their names. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, in the past I have talked with few surgeons that they really like glass and they want to see more applications. So I'm just trying to pick thoughts from their minds in order to see what I can do and how we can make those ideas reality. So yeah, so there are many surgeons that I have talked, from orthopedic surgery to general and cardiothoracic surgery. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you have to imagine surgery, right, when you're actually doing surgery. So if I'm a surgeon and I'm in there and I'm saying clamp, scalpel, all that sort of stuff, how does glass differentiate my regular conversations with other people within the within the environment? I can say okay, glass, but if somebody else is talking at the same time, right, those sorts of things can be a challenge because everybody's right there, right, and so you can hear other people's voices. So does that mean that whenever the surgeon talks, everybody else has to be quiet in the OR? Right, those are the kinds of social challenges you might face as well.
I've actually come up with a solution for that.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm actually basing this wearable technology in a lot of my different solutions. So there's this wearable called the NIMI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's a wearable band that authenticates you based on your ECG, your unique ECG. And it's coming to me this month, actually. So but I already have access to the emulator as a developer.
Okay.
I'm
Cool.
using it for different. Okay.
Definitely.
Now I'm asking myself, why don't we have more of these Hangouts? Because I'm like, you've been doing I need more.
I've done a lot since the last Hangout that you had. What was his name?
Obviously. Oh, it was a while?
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Also, thank you, Kathy, for your leadership in this. You're the one that helped bring me into the fold, and I've learned a tremendous amount, and wouldn't have been able to do it without you. So I appreciate your help.
Oh, that's very
Yeah, thanks a lot. All this input is really valuable to me. So I really want to see what other people is doing. So thanks a lot for.
Well, we need to have some more of these conversations. I need the guidance from the community, people like you who have a particular topic that you want to share or that you want to talk about or explore, because I'm not a developer. I'm just a very tech curious person. So I don't always know those conversations until they evolve, like we just did. Here's Dorian saying, oh, I've been working on that, and I've been working on this. So I'd love to have more of these conversations if somebody would give me some guidance in what would be useful to the community. So I think we are coming at the top of the hour. We've had a wonderful discussion, and this is just the beginning for our UK Glass Explorers to begin developing and for our US developers to continue developing, and it's really exciting to hear from very smart and innovative people like yourselves.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Great.
I'm going to wrap it up for today's Glass Chat in Hangout, and I'm Kathy Brown of Brown Nose Social Media. My guest, Giannis, I don't want to try to say that name again, but I'm going to try. Here we go. Giannis Anastasiadis.
Yes, exactly.
And hopefully the next time we have him in a Hangout, he will have revealed his new startup company, which is not yet named, but I'm told will hit the news not too long from now. So I'm really looking forward to finding out what the name of that company is and all of the great things that all of the Glass Explorers do. And thank you for watching, viewers, and for the viewers who joined me, Aaron Jansen and Dorian Sanchez. And this wraps it up for today's broadcast.